Hi guys, let's answer some qigong questions. Continuing off from where we left off last time, it's for Gerald. Okay, the second question you have. I'm intrigued by the idea of the strength of the body. Surely anyone that practices in martial arts must by nature develop a strong body. So how does the qigong perspective on physical power differ or add to that? That's a good question. Okay. So far we've been talking about how when we practice sitting is for emotional healing on the first basic level, right? Then after that, we go into a more spiritual aspect of the merging process. But long before that, traditionally in Taoism, a lot of lineages will practice physical fatality first, or the standing practices, which consists of moving and not moving. And the main reason why is without good, strong physical fatality, Ming in Chinese, then when you practice prolonged sitting, you're going to hurt yourself physically and mentally, as modern science has well documented prolonged sitting is bad for humans. So that's the reason why. And you're asking, well, if you do martial arts, the background that I came from, obviously you have a pretty strong body, then why do you have to, do the standing practice? Well, it's a different kind of physical fatality, right? Like when you lift weights or when you go running and you go to the gym, and I go to the gym, not as much as I used to, but I lift weights and I do running, right? And stretching and all that. So you do better. Obviously, you strengthen your muscles and your tendons, and also your heart and your lungs. The chemicals in your body change when you exercise. Is really good for you. You end up feeling more energy afterwards because the circulation in your body and also the functioning of your entire body improves when you exercise. You're overloading your body and you're putting your body, your heart, and your lungs through extra work. This is very generalized, but of course there's more to it than that with the chemicals. But basically, you're overworking your body or overloading your body, and therefore improving your body to do work, and so you feel a lot better. Despite that, which is really good health benefit, the fact is you're still using energy. That's why after you train or you work out, whether it's martial arts or weightlifting or walking or any kind of physical activity, usually afterwards you feel a little bit tired, you need some rest, and you need time to recover, and also you need good nutrition, right? It's because you're using energy. And through the process of using energy, you're improving your body's entire functioning because you're forcing your body to function better, to do more work. So that's good, but you're using energy. Whereas standing is different. You're not using that much energy, rather you're generating energy. Qigong, like rather you do moving practice and you're standing, when you're done, you don't feel tired, at least when you do it properly. Instead, you feel more energized. So it's different than when you're doing physical exercise, like weightlifting or walking or whatever. You feel more tired afterwards, especially if you worked out really hard. And then maybe a day later or quite a few hours later, you feel more energy because your body's working better. But right afterwards, because you use energy, you feel more drained. Qigong is different. Rather, it is right afterwards or long afterwards, you're gonna feel more energy because you're generating energy. You're not really generating energy. You're building a container where you're absorbing energy, right? Uh, you can watch episode one, no, it's episode two, where I talk about what is qi. That would give you a pretty good perspective of what that means. So when we practice standing, for example, the feeling you get is you're absorbing energy and you're not using energy. You don't feel drained afterwards, you feel more energy, but it's not the type of feeling you get when you have a lot of coffee or something and you feel really amped up. There's more a very calm feeling, as though you feel like you just had a really good night rest, right? And during at the time, you feel your body's flooded with warmth because that's exactly the feeling of the blood that's circulating well into the body. On a more advanced level, you feel your magnetic field that you're actually absorbing energy. In either case, you improve your physical functioning, but more importantly, you increase your energy. But you're not going to be able to lift weights any like stronger just because you do qigong. So it's not that kind of thing, right? It's not the outer layer of the body like your tendons and your muscle, but rather it is the internal, especially the central nervous system and the organs when you're doing standing. And you will feel that you get sick a lot less. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I should only speak for myself. When I was doing it a lot, I got one thing that surprised me is I needed less sleep, Also, I was getting sick a lot less, like getting your common cold or something, right? I got off allergy pills. Like usually, I get pollen, hay fever, like seasonal. When the plants are coming out in the spring or something, I usually get a stuffy nose, I get brain fog, and I get really bad allergies. But by the second year of qigong, for some reason, like right now, I don't feel any allergy. If it was this time of the year, like say 6 years ago, right now my eyes would be swelled up and watering from allergies, but I'm fine these days, right? I never run out of energy. I don't have to take naps anymore. Late at night, I still got a lot of energy, but I'm calm. So all that is from the standing practice, not the sitting, right? So that's one of the symptoms or one of the benefits of standing. There's many more. So I hope that gives you a brief idea. So in summary, when you're doing physical exercise, the container, the functioning of the body gets better. Its ability to do work gets better because you're putting your body through work. But in that process, you're using up calories and burning fuel and energy. Whereas standing Qigong and moving Qigong, unless you really overdo it, usually afterwards it's the opposite. You don't feel like you drain your energy, but you have a sensation like you just gather more energy. So that's the main difference. So I hope I answered that. The next question. And lastly, in your current video, you mentioned that Qigong practice should follow one's personality. That was in some previous episode, maybe a few episodes back. I found that idea particularly thought provoking. Could you perhaps elaborate a little on what exactly that means in practical terms? Okay. Apologies if any of these questions were things that you already talked about in previous episode. I may well have overlooked something along the way. Warm regards and thank you again for your work. Please keep it up, Joe. All right, thanks, man. Okay, so let me talk about that a bit more. Okay, this idea of when you do qigong, that it must suit your personality was something I talked about in one of the earlier episodes. I believe the title of the episode was "Do What Matches You" or "Qigong That Match You," something like that. You'll find it on the playlist on the channel for the Qigong podcast. The main idea for me was many years ago, like over 30 years ago when I first started qigong. I always had this intuitive feeling, because of my personality, that you shouldn't do anything and the qi should teach you and move you. And the qi is not just energy, but rather is what we call spirit, or something that's alive, universal consciousness, not so much form. But when I did qigong, I started with each one, and that was a communist era developed qigong. And during the communist era in China, especially the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese government was trying to improve China, the Great Leap Forward, right? So they were getting rid of anything that they thought was superstitious or anything that was ancient, actually, or shamanistic. So qigong, that kind of practice, they stripped it apart. Anything that was good for physical vitality, they kept. Anything that they considered spiritual or superstitious, they destroyed the best they could, including book burning, executing and putting practitioners in jail, re-educating program. A lot of that stuff was happening at that era in China during the communist era. And the physical fatality stuff, they term exercise. They decided to invent a new name for it, which is qigong. That's where that word actually came from. The word qigong didn't really exist until about the 1940s. I use that term so Google search for it can find my work for those that are looking for me on YouTube and Google, but it's not really a correct term. That term only existed since the 1940s when the communist government kind of burn and destroy anything spiritual, kept the physical stuff and called it qigong as a form of internal exercise for life force. So the paradigm is qi is a life force, it is not alive. But that is not the way qigong was before it was called qigong. It was called yang san gong, or body nourishing skill for the body, and dosa, or the way of Tao, or Tao skill for all the sitting spiritual stuff. For about, depending on which scholar you read, for about 7 to 4,000 years, qigong, what we call qigong nowadays, was very spiritual. In fact, all the physical fatality stuff was just really used to support the sitting. The sitting was where it was at, to merge with the Tao. So I always had that feeling intuitively. that the Tao or the Qi should be alive. And they should be something that I surrender to teach me instead of me trying to do something. I don't know why I always knew that, but I always knew that. But because I started with each one, which was the communist era developed thing, when I did each one, it was a big no-no, right? My Sifu and my Grandmaster and my Kung Fu uncles were like, hey, look, when you hold a ball, when you build a container, when you shake the tree, when you post the string, when you root into the ground, when you open your pores and do your bone breathing, when you do all that, when you smile, spread the warm feeling around the body, that's great. Don't try to control the chi, right? But when I say, okay, what if it's moving you spontaneously? They're like, no, don't do that. We don't do that in each one. I said, what about the chi's alive? Because we don't talk about that. We don't do that. That's a big no-no. So I felt like I was going against my personality. So every time I was practicing qigong, I always felt like I needed discipline, like I was forcing myself to do something that I wasn't born to do, that didn't fit my DNA, right? So that's what I mean in the previous episode when I said to do what matches you. But I still did enough of it. Like I'll do a few hours a week just so I can make my martial art better. Because for about 39 years that I did martial art, 24 years out of it, I was obsessed with martial art. So I ended up doing qigong. But about 5 years ago, when I decided to be full time, 4 to 6 hours, usually about 4 hours of qigong a day, every day, to heal myself, I knew I was going to not be consistent, just like my past, if I did something that didn't really fit my personality. So I need to find something with a paradigm that the chi is alive and the chi, you surrender to the chi and the chi moves you. You do not control it. This is common sense in other traditions like Hinduism. In Hinduism, your Atman or your soul and Brahman ice in the ocean, so the ice melt into the ocean. So the ocean would be Brahman, the ice cube, the water in the ice cube would be Atman. And the ice in the ocean metaphor is from Zen. It's the fastest and easiest way to talk about it, where basically you dissolve your body into your aura. The aura is the ice cube, and then when the ice cube melts, the water go back into the ocean. That's what the merging process is. In Hinduism, the ice cube, your soul, would be called your Atman, and then the ocean would be called the Brahman. And in Hinduism, the Brahman or the water or the light or the chi, whatever you want to call it, is consciousness, bliss, and another characteristic of it is being. So it's the life force, it is blissful, and it is fully alive. It's universal consciousness. So in Hinduism, what I intuitively want and know was common sense, even though I wasn't allowed to think or do that in each one. In Buddhism, that's also common sense. The whole point of dissolving is so you can awaken, which means you dissolve into your innate nature in Buddhism, which is what awakening is. And they call it emptiness. When the ocean dissolves into when the ice cube dissolves into the ocean is emptiness. Or universal energy, whatever you call it. And emptiness in Buddhism is considered Buddha nature, is conscious, is everything's mind. So the nature of emptiness is that it is conscious, is universal consciousness, and they call it Buddha nature. So that's common sense in Buddhism as well. So what I intuitively want out of Qigong, and that is that Qi is moving you, you're not moving the Qi, and the Qi is alive, even though it's such a big no-no when I was doing each one, is actually common sense in Hinduism, common sense in Buddhism, the basic premise actually, and common sense in Christian mystics. Because if you look at Meister Eckhart, for example, he talks about how when you're praying, the whole point of being a mystic is when you pray, you dissolve, you go into nothingness. So you got man, God, Godhead. Godhead is nothingness, emptiness. So I'm like, shit, they have it too in Christian mystics. They have it in Hinduism. They have it in Buddhism. They have it in psychedelics. When people talk about DMT experience, they go into a spiritual realm, but if they really smoke a lot, they go into the white light, just like. And they're also documented in thousands and thousands of cases of near-death experience, right? You go into the spiritual realm, you dissolve, you go into the pure light. They also document that in quantum physics, right? So a form comes from energy, and energy, if you dissect it, the atoms and everything, is 86% emptiness, nothingness. And the founder of quantum physics, Max Planck, I think it is, and also Nikola Tesla, also Plato, also Nobel Prize winner for zero-point energy. All of them documented that this universal energy at its basis is conscious. It's not dead. It's basically panpsychism by the Greeks. So every culture has this except for I'm doing qigong and I go, shit, that's what I want, but I'm not allowed. And then I realized I was 120% wrong. I was assuming qigong doesn't have this. But when I was dying and I was really sick, I seeked out my mentor and friend Steve Smith, the inheritor of Fukien Chuan. He learned from Grandmaster Fukien, who was also a leader and Grandmaster of the Heaven Mountain sect of Taoism. And he taught me that system of Qigong, which is what I practice now. And in his system, it says, "You're too stupid. The Qi teach you, and the Qi's alive." I was like, so Taoism always had this. He goes, yeah. Like, and then as I do more research, in Taoism, we call it Sanling or Ling, which means the Tao is actually alive. Later on, I think it was a few months later, I got my hands on the Nei Yi, which is the original scripture of Taoism. It talked about how the Qi and the Tao is basically the same thing, and also the presence of it. So the Qi is the Tao, and the Tao is alive. So I'm like, oh, so it is the same as quantum physics, Hinduism, and Buddhism. It's not the same, but the basic premise that when you melt into the stuff is not dead energy, but the stuff's alive. Not only was I wrong that didn't exist in Taoism, but it was actually a main thing up until the communists destroy it, right? Because if you right now you go around and you talk to any Buddhist, emptiness is Buddha nature. Emptiness is alive. They all know that. Hinduism's the same. Christian mystics is the same. Quantum physics, some of it. But if you talk to Taoist guys, probably right now, if you look at it, 80% of Qigong practitioners don't think the Tao is alive. They just think it's nature's order. And they also don't think the Qi's alive because most of them are practicing stuff that are modern from the communist era. And I belong to that. But once I break out of that, because I realized the history, I realized I've been fooled. Because they were burning books and destroying this stuff the best they can in the 1940s, right? So once I realized this stuff actually fit my personality, then I did a deep dive and it completely healed me because I was practicing consistently. Because I was practicing something that actually fit my personality, which to me is the most important thing, right? Not only in Qigong, but also in martial arts. The same thing as repeated in martial art 30 years earlier. I was doing martial arts since I was 9 years old. I'm 50 right now, so I've been doing it 41 years. But I always say 39 years because I don't count the first 2 years because I was taught by a family friend that wasn't even formal instruction. It was very loose. So I didn't count the first 2 years. But it doesn't matter. Roughly about 40 years of training. I didn't excel in it until my 10th year. And then all of a sudden my learning curve went pretty high compared to the first 10 years. And the only main difference between the two was that I decided to do things that suited my heart and suited my body type. Once I did something that fit my personality and my body type, my learning curve was easily 5 times more than before. I went from being the last in my class to the head of my class. So this stuff works. And the same thing as in life. You see people in a wrong job, in a wrong relationship, living in the wrong country, eating the wrong food. They're not doing what suits them organically, uniquely. Everybody's unique, right? If you read the Taoist scripture, Cheng Tzu really talk about this in a common sense. Between the different animals, if you had to raise different animals, like a bird, like a dog, like a cat, you can't do the same thing for all of it. They all have different needs. They all have different wants. If you want the best for each animal, you have to raise each of them differently, right? And he was using that as a metaphor for humans. We all have different body type, different inclination and movements in martial art, different temperament, different past trauma, and just we carry a different DNA. So the way we fight, every one of us is different, and the way we live, everyone's different. You know, like whether it's a relationship or work or anything. So if you want to be really, really, really effective, and Taoism is very, at least pre-communist Taoism, are not a belief system cast in stone. They're very flexible. The bottom line is, does it work effectively? That's all they care about. So going by that premise, does it work effectively? And if you were to answer that question in any arena in your life, then you cannot bypass the basic form law that you have to work with the uniqueness of your form. Rather, it is your mental form, your personality, or your physical form, your body type. As long as you respect your mental and physical form, you're going to be able to perform and make things work for you way more effectively in your life, in martial art and qigong and everything, than if you were to go against the grain. You would think that's common sense, and most of us know this. But most of us violate this on a daily basis because we're constantly being conditioned by our government, by our parents, by our education system, and nowadays by social media to try to copy everyone else, to behave or else. Especially around the COVID time, you really see that kind of fear peak, right? And that's a good way to control people. And you're being conditioned subconsciously. We all are. So when we practice, we try to kind of see that the best we can without the resentment, without the anger, but just to calm down and see it clearly and slowly, quietly work with ourselves as we are without disrespecting our own body and minds, right? And spirituality is no different. Even though Hinduism, like I said, circled back earlier, Hindu and Buddhism and Christian mystics already had that aliveness idea that I was seeking in Taoism. So why was I so stubborn to stick with Taoism is once I realized Taoism had it too, I was happy because Taoism was also into the standing and moving practice. Because I was so sick at the time, I really feel like I needed that. And I just want to circle back to explain that because some people ask me, well, Buddhism and Hinduism already had it. Why were you so stubborn and so sad and had to wait a long time to prove that in Taoism before you jumped in? That's the reason why, because the physical fatality part for me, I needed both, right? Anyways, I hope that kind of answered your question. If you get any more questions, please let me know. These are some of the things that we can talk about all day, but it doesn't help. You got to learn how to do it. We're going to be working on that. Actually, this Thursday is the first new live stream class. If you're interested, you can always follow the link in the description below. But one thing before I go, I got an email from my old website. adamchanlive.com is a website that I filmed a lot of old Kung Fu programs. If you're interested in the Qigong or anything I talk about in the podcast, please take your time to go to the link below. It's adamchanlive.com. If you email the wrong website, I might not even see the message. So this is very important. Just go to the description below in this video. You will see adamchanlive.com. Always follow the link and I'll always see the message. So please email that website, adamchanlive.com. That's the website. All right, guys. See you next time.